Thank you for joining us for this week's message at Crosswind Church. If you have any questions about this message or about Crosswind Church, please visit us at www.crosswindchurch.net, or you can email us at info@crosswindchurch.net.
Well, good morning. My name is Jeremy. I'm the pastor here at Crosswind. I don't know about you. You couple daylight savings time with the rain hitting the metal roof, and I just want to go to sleep. I don't know about y'all. Movie at this afternoon at 4. If it's still doing this rain garbage, I'm going to make a pallet over there. My kids can watch the movie. I'm taking a nap. Anyway, regardless of that, we're so glad that you're here. If you're a first-time guest, we're right in the middle of a series. I'll explain that here in just a minute. One of the things that you need to know about me is my kind of defrag position, the place that I like to go to kind of defrag at the end of a day is in front of the television. That's probably a really terrible habit, but that's kind of what I like to do. And so we have busy at the office or at the ballpark, wherever it is you're going to be. And then I love to come home and we eat dinner and the kids go to bed, and then I sit down and turn on the TV and just don't think about life for a little while. It's one of my favorite things to do. I have a couple shows that are go-to shows for me, and so I'll watch those. Typically, I'll watch them over and over again. I don't care if I've seen them before. But I tend to kind of lean towards the History Channel. I love the History Channel. If they're doing something like Ancient Aliens or something like that, I'm out. I'm not into this garbage. But I love shows that involve negotiating. It's American Pickers, where they're in somebody's attic or basement and they find some kind of treasure they didn't know that they had, and they want to buy it, and hey, it's worth this amount, but I'll pay this amount, and they kind of have the back and forth. Or Pawn Stars, where somebody brings in something that they think is valuable, and Rick and Chumley and all those guys decide we're gonna negotiate that price. And I love watching it because I kind of like watching the dance, and I understand there's kind of unspoken rules, and maybe even some spoken rules about negotiation. Here's what I know about negotiation: I am terrible at it. I'm absolutely the worst at negotiating. I had lunch this last week with Garrett Quinn, who's a car salesman here, #AskForGarrett, and I went that lunch and I was like, I hate buying cars, right? Because I'm so bad at negotiating. I'll walk in and be like, this car is $20,000. And I'm like, I'll give you $21,000. I add to the price. I don't know. It's terrible. I'm not very good at it. Maybe you guys are good at it. Maybe it's one of those things you like to negotiate. You're like that person that gets up early in the morning on Saturday morning and goes to yard sales, not because you need anything, but because you want to see how cheaply you can get someone else's stuff. Go get a box and fill it with everything and take it to the owner and be like, I'll give you a nickel, and see what you can get, how you can negotiate. You just love the thrill of the chase. Maybe you don't like to negotiate. Maybe you're a little bit like me. You're not really good at it. But I will tell you one way that we all tend to kind of negotiate at one point in time in our life. And we tend to kind of negotiate with God. We kind of tend to negotiate the terms that surround our obedience. We tend to kind of negotiate things that go on in our relationship with God quite a bit. Last week I told you a little bit about my story. I told you that in 6th grade, very early on, I began this kind of wrestling match with God over this vision that He kind of put in my heart. Very clearly, I can remember being in the 6th grade and God just revealing to me, hey, I want you to help people, right? I want you to be involved in helping people. And so I just concocted in my mind what that looked like. And I began to kind of manipulate, and kind of leverage some relationships that I had in order to kind of make it in that direction and kind of moving in that way. And when I was a senior in college, I kind of found myself in this really unique position where I kind of began to kind of negotiate with God again. So at the end of my senior year, I decided that I was going to go into biomedical research and do that first. That was kind of where I was going to go. I'd been doing that during summers when I was in college and been doing research as well, just scientific research during my semesters there in college. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do. I applied to 3 schools: Emory University, Vanderbilt University, and UAB in Birmingham. But really what I did is I took all of my eggs and I put them in the Vanderbilt basket. In fact, I remember I got a letter from Emory University, an email saying, hey, we haven't gotten your GRE scores, and you've applied, we got everything else, we don't have your GRE scores. All I had to do was call GRE and go, send the scores to Emory. And I was like, nah, don't worry about it. All my eggs in one basket. That was kind of what I did. Don't do as I do. It's terrible. And so the way that these kind of application processes work, if you're not familiar, is what you would do is you'd apply and send all of your test scores, and then if they liked your application, they'd invite you for an interview. And this interview was really a wine and dine kind of thing. They'd bring you in and put you up in a nice hotel, and they introduce you to all the powerful people at the university and tell you all the things they were going to give you. And it was as much as you like turning them down as it was them turning you down at that point. It was kind of this mutual kind of thing. But nonetheless, I was all in at Vandy, and this is where I was going to go. And the recruiting trip took place over a weekend. And so Sunday I went back to Sanford in Birmingham where I was in college, and they said, hey, on Monday we'll send an email out. Everybody did really well, that we want them to come be a student here. We'll send them an email letting you know whether you got in or not, whether we want you to come be a student here. And it got that reality hit, like when you get home Sunday night, early Monday morning, you're like, oh no, like all my eggs are in this basket. Do they like me? Please love me. Like, that type of thing. Maybe you've been to a job interview or you've interviewed at a university like this, you understand. And so the morning of Monday, I got up and I pull up my email, and I'm waiting on the email, no email Monday morning. I was like, well, it's kind of to be expected. They need to probably have some meetings to talk about this before they do it. And so midday, I go to class, I come back, check it, refresh, nothing, no email from them. I go, let's go to lunch. I come back after lunch, I'm checking it, nothing. Right? You're constantly just kind of looking at a computer screen going, please tell me something, give me some kind of information. Now, in the afternoons, I worked at computer services at Sanford. So what that meant is I was like an IT guy that sat behind a computer and answered phone calls, like people that had problems with their phone, that answered phone calls, and I was condescending. That was what the role of IT guys is. You'll catch that joke on the way home. Anyway, regardless of that, like people would call and I'd be like, did you turn your computer on? Is it plugged in? We had to say those things because like people sometimes didn't plug them in. Didn't know why they didn't work. Anyway, so I'm there, and all day I'm in front of, after I get out of school and out of lunch and my schedule's kind of over, I'm working at computer services and I'm watching the computer screen. Hit refresh. Nothing. Hit refresh. Nothing. Answer a phone call. Hit refresh. Nothing. So I began to pray. I began to negotiate. See, what I haven't told you is that earlier in my senior year, I had some opportunities that had kind of come my way that had really kind of changed the way that I was thinking God might be leading me in my life. I had some opportunities to go lead in some disciple mouths, 2 or 3 of them in that fall, where I go and I sit in rooms with teenagers and teach them the Word of God, and I loved watching them get it, like those light bulbs go on. It was so amazing to kind of get to have that interpersonal relationship with folks where like you got to explain something and they got it. Like if you're a teacher, maybe you understand that. And I'd also gotten elected to offices and positions of leadership in some various organizations on campus that were missions and ministry-based, and I was leading teams. I was getting ready to lead a team to Germany, and we led a team to Mississippi earlier in the year, and it was just things that were starting to kind of well up inside of me. Maybe God, this is what I was thinking, maybe God is leading me into the ministry, that vocational ministry, not into medicine, but He's doing something else with me. And I would say things like, maybe He was doing it, because I really didn't want to believe that He was. Because I had seen preachers. I didn't want to have a pompadour and make no money. Like that was what I saw, right? I don't want to do that. Like I want to be able to go on vacation with my family and not worry about who's going to preach on Sunday or whatever it is. Like that's not what I want. And so God, I'm just going to be like the best Christian I can be in a research laboratory, going and seeing patients, whatever it is. I'm just going to be the best that I can be as a follower of Jesus there. But you might be calling the ministry, but God, you've opened up all of these doors. And so I began kind of praying, okay, God, if that's what you want from me, then I will go and look at seminaries, and I will go and look at ministry, and I will go and kind of explore this route if Vanderbilt turns me down. I'll be obedient to you. This is what I'm saying. I'll be obedient to you and do what I'm certain, even though I'm denying it, it's certain is on my heart. I'll do it if I don't get what I want. You guys may know the rest of the story. Vanderbilt accepted me. And I spent a year wrestling with God over this calling of my life before I finally surrendered. I wonder if you've ever negotiated with God, right? Like made a deal with God. My freshman year of college, I can remember talking with a guy who's a year older than me. His name was Leif, like Leif Erikson, like the Viking. Like it's just a cool name. And his name was Leif. And we were sitting at a table over lunch, and he was telling a story. We were talking about like dumb things that college freshmen do, because I was a college freshman. And so he was telling me about something that had happened when he was a college freshman. He said, listen, a bunch of us guys that lived on our hall, we all dipped. And so like we had like spit bottles that we'd have, we'd spit our dip in, or cups, whatever. And at the end of every day, we would take our spit cups and we would dump it into a big jug, right? And we don't know why we did it. We just collected this all semester. All the guys on the hall just kind of to do this. And Christmas came, and we went home for the holiday, and we forgot about the jug. Like, we just left it there in the dorm room, and we go home for Christmas. And there's this period of time in college where the students come back, but your classes haven't started yet. So students are in the dorm. He said a bunch of us guys on our hall, we were good friends. We're just hanging out, and we end up, it's after midnight. We're in our dorm room, and we're just kind of talking and cutting up. And somebody sees the jug of tobacco spit in the corner, and he makes a statement. I'll give somebody, and he filled in an amount of money, this amount of money if they'll take a drink of it. To which somebody else in the room goes, I'll give a little bit more, right? And so they start talking about how much money all of them would put in. They pass a hat around the room, and they collect this amount of money, this huge sum of money, which to a college student may have been $50. I don't know how much it was, but they got this amount of money. And finally, they find some sucker in the room and go, all right, for that amount of money, I'll do it, right? And it happened to be Leaf's roommate. So Leaf is telling the story, this is his roommate. And so to save you all the gory details, he does it. Like, he scoops up the bottom and takes this way. Anyway, regardless. So they all have a good laugh because it doesn't hit him immediately, right? But they all have kind of a good laugh and oh man, you're an idiot. You know how guys are, And then they all go to bed. Lee said, we cut the light out in our dorm room, laying on the bed. I hear my roommate across the room. He goes, Leaf. He said, I turn the light on. He's sitting on the edge of his bed. He's got a garbage can. And everything that had been in his body for the last week was just coming out. Like, it was just terrible. And he said, I had to get up and make sure he's okay and get him cleaned up and do all those things, and make sure that everybody's going to be all right. We finally got him to where, he was okay enough to go to sleep. We'll see how dehydrated he is in the morning. Like, I don't know. And they cut the light and go to sleep. He said the next morning was Sunday. And I woke up the next morning, he said, and I looked across the room and my roommate wasn't in bed. And I thought, oh no. Perhaps he died in the middle of the night, and somebody had to come and get him. I don't know. And so he said, I sit up in bed, and I kind of look around, and my roommate comes out of the bathroom, and he's like dressed, ready to go to church. Like, it's Sunday morning, he's going to church. And he said to him, he said, buddy, you had kind of a rough night last night. Why don't you lay off? Hey, if anybody deserves or has a right to sleep in on Sunday, it's you. You've had a rough go of it. And the guy said to leave. He said, no. He said, I am not going to church today. He said, because last night I made a deal with God. And I told him, if you let me live through the night, tomorrow, all the money that I got in this ill-conceived bet, all the money that I'm giving to you, every bit of it, God, if you'll just let me live through the night, I'll give it to you. And I wonder how many of us try to negotiate with God and make deals with God in that same way. God, if you will, then I will. I'll be obedient if you will do something. And we negotiate the terms of our obedience with God. So we said things like, God, listen, I know that you've told me I should be financially responsible and that I should be generous with the wealth that you've given me. But God, if you'll just give me the next raise, if you'll just give me the next bonus, if you'll just give me the next business deal, then I'll start giving to the ministry of the church. Then I'll start giving to missions. Then I'll start investing in the nonprofit and giving to the needy in our community. But God, you're going to have to do something, and then I'll be obedient. Maybe it's in your marriage. You know that the problem that's going on in your marriage is that there's an addiction, or the problem that's going on in your marriage is that you have an issue with regard to jealousy or envy or selfishness or anger or whatever it may be. And you go, okay, God, if you'll tell him to not leave, if he'll just say, I'm not leaving, then I'll deal with the issue. Then I'll go get counseling. Or God, if you'll make it to where she won't leave, or you'll save our marriage, then God, I'll really do what it is that I'm supposed to do. Maybe it's something that God, if you just give me one more date with him, just one more chance. Or God, if you'll just make it to where she's not pregnant, then I promise we'll honor you with our bodies from here on out. Right? And we make deals with God, and we make deals basing on the term of our obedience on him doing something for us. The thing is, come on, don't we know this? The thing is that we are in no position to negotiate the terms of our obedience with God. We're in no position to negotiate the terms of our obedience. with God. Those of us that are parents, you understand this. Let me talk to you parents for just a minute. See, how many of y'all have made deals with your kids? Where they come in and you're like, okay, here's the deal. If you clean your room, then I will give you ice cream. Okay? Or if you will help pick up sticks in the yard, then we can throw baseball afterwards. Right? If you do this, as my child, then there's more time on a device, there's more time on the computer, whatever it may be, there's a reward for your actions. Now, that's something that as a parent we do as a motivational tool for our kids, to try to get them to do what it is that we want them to do. But if you have a kid that's maybe like my youngest, like my Abby Jo, what you'll see is you'll make a deal with her or your child, and it'll be like, if you do this and I'll do this, and the kid will come back and they'll go, okay, that sounds like a good deal, but let me counter. How about you give me ice cream and I don't clean my room, but I talk to you about cleaning my room tomorrow? Right? No, that's not how it works. As parents, no, come on. As parents, we go, listen, you are in no position, my child, to make negotiations. You're in no position to determine how it is that you're obedient to me. That's not how it works, right? You have to realize I'm the parent and you're the child, and yet how many of us approach our God like a toddler approaching his parent going, okay, God, if you'll do this, then I'll do this. And we just realize, we know it, that we are in no position to negotiate the terms of our obedience with God. And let me tell you where we're going with this today, is that so many of us do this. As we seek to find like meaning in life, as we seek to find the direction that God would have us to go. And last week we began talking about a guy in Scripture by the name of Jacob. And Jacob had been given a massive promise from God through his mom, that the covenant promises of God are going to come through you. You're going to have a lot of descendants. You are going to have a lot of blessing and a lot of wealth. And the world is going to be blessed through you, Jacob. And Jacob hears this from his mama. And he immediately begins kind of manipulating situations and taking advantage of his brother and lying to people in order to achieve what he is convinced God has promised him, in the way in which he's convinced he needs to achieve what God has promised him. You with me? And today what we're going to determine, and what we're going to see, is that Jacob actually gets to a point that you and I have been at. A point where we start to negotiate with God the terms of our obedience. Where we start to say, God, okay, if you'll, then I'll. Okay, God, if you, then I. So before we dive into Scripture, let me give you some background. We left Jacob last week as he was made an enemy with his brother Esau. Esau was mad, and Esau said, I'm going to kill him. Esau said, as soon as Daddy dies, I'm going to kill him. And this isn't like hyperbole like we might use in our family, right? Like when our sibling gets mad, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to kill him. No. He's saying, I'm going to murder him. Like, I'm going to absolutely kill him. This is not hyperbole. I'm literally going to take his life, okay? That's what Esau was going to do. Now, Rebecca, Jacob's mama, found out about this, and she goes, we got to get Jake out of Dodge. Like, we've got to send him away, because otherwise Esau is going to kill him. Jacob, it needs to go. Now, Rebecca had a problem in the fact that Esau had already married some of the women that were living around where they were, the Hittites, the Canaanites, and she didn't like them. In fact, some people have pointed to later God would actually make rules against intermarrying with other folks that lived around the nation of Israel. And that was because he wanted to maintain the religious purity of the people that were there. It wasn't a race or an ethnic issue. Here, those rules, those laws hadn't been made yet. Rebecca's just a racist. Like, she just doesn't like those people that are around them for whatever reason, their culture, whatever it was. And so she says, listen, the way we're going to solve this is we're going to send Jake to my brother, his uncle Laban. And we're going to send him up there, and there he's going to find a wife from amongst my relatives. She gets Isaac involved with it, and Isaac says that's fine, and sure enough, they send Jacob on his way. Now, to give you some perspective, this journey that Jacob was on is not a short journey. It's not like he had to walk to Martin. In fact, it was about 500 to 550 miles or so from where they were currently living to Haran, where Laban was living. It's the equivalent of you starting out today in Union City and walking to Milwaukee. It's a long way. Many months worth of journey. So Jacob starts off on his journey, and that's where our adventure today begins. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 28. We're going to begin in verse 10. If you have your Bible, you can turn there, you can go on your app, or you can follow along on the screen. We have all the words there. Excuse me. Okay. Verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba, and he set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he he stopped for the night because the sun had set, and taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and he lay down to sleep. It's important for us to kind of note as we begin this story that Jacob wasn't planning on stopping at this location. In fact, it may have been, Hosea would tell us later, that he's running from his brother. Maybe that Esau is kind of chasing him, and he didn't have time to plan where he's going to stop. It's not a leisurely stroll. He's got to get out of Dodge fast or Esau's going to get him, okay? So he's just moving, and before we realize it, the sun is set, and he's got to find a place to sleep. And so because the sun had kind of set before he was ready, he wasn't really prepared for it. And so he just finds a certain place, it says, a certain place to lay down. Have you ever been on that? Can you experience what Jacob, have you experienced what Jacob was experiencing? Like you're on a long journey and you weren't planning to necessarily stop anywhere, and all of a sudden you realize it's late. I got to get a couple hours of sleep. I can't stay awake anymore. I can remember one time Jody and I were driving from Birmingham to Fort Worth, Texas, and we left late in the day. And our goal was, some of you guys have these goals and you can pull it off. We can't pull it off. I said, we'll just go until we can't go anymore and then we'll stop, right? And so it's like after midnight, it's nearing 1 o'clock, and we've got to stop somewhere because I'm going to fall asleep. Like there's only so many energy drinks and cups of coffee that you can have before you got to stop somewhere. And so we finally decided we're going to stop here and try to find a place. We haven't made any reservations. We don't know. And so we pull over to this hotel and there's no rooms. We go to another one, they have no rooms. We finally find a hotel that has one room available. Here's the catch. They only had one bed. It was a king-size bed. And we were like, we don't care. We'll take it. Right? The girls are little. We'll all just pile in this bed. All I need is a few hours of sleep so we can continue motoring on our destination. We get the key to the room. We come to the room. And I'm just telling you, I keep passing. Like it was such a sketchy place. You're passing like chalk outlines on the ground. Like some stuff. Maybe you stay in some places like this. We walk into the room, and I promise you, it smelled like every cigarette that had ever been invented had been smoked in that room. And the person that smoked them then died. Like that was how bad the smell was in the room. And we were like, we don't even care. We just have to sleep. That's where Jacob is. He's tired from his journey. He didn't really know where he is. There's no city. There's no hospitality. There's no inn. There's no Holiday Inn. It's just, hey, I got to find a nice little place where I'm going to be safe tonight just to get a few hours of sleep. He even tells us he takes a rock and uses it as a pillow. Come on, y'all. I'm not a prima donna, okay? I don't think. Like, we carry our pillows with us when we travel because we love our pillows. I can't imagine any circumstance where I'm putting a rock under my head, but that's exactly what Jacob does here as he finds this place to stop, lays his head down on a rock to get a few hours of sleep. Verse 12, he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth with its top reaching to heaven, and that angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord. Anytime you see the Lord in Scripture, and it's all capital letters in your Bible you're reading, it's the covenantal name of God. It's Yahweh is what's there. So there he sees Yahweh, and he says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you're lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Now, there's a couple things that I love about this image, this dream that he has. First of all, God uses imagery that would have made sense to Jacob. This type of staircase or ladder that is described as was something that was incredibly common in Mesopotamia and the ancient Near East. In fact, we can go back to the Tower of Babel and say that this is probably the same type of pyramid, like ziggurat, stepstone pyramid that he's seeing as a way to go up to heaven so that God could descend down to this temple and be worshipped. We can in fact go to Mexico and see the Mayans and the Aztecs build similar structures. It's a very common type of site. Jacob would have immediately known what this was because all the cultures around this area would have talked about this, would have had these sorts of things. Jacob recognizes it as a portal. This is a place where heaven and earth kind of meet, where the God or gods can descend to earth and go about to do their duty on earth and can go and be worshipped by people that are there. The only difference between the common picture of the day in Mesopotamia that was around and the image that Jacob sees is God's location in the puzzle. God is not coming down and descending and ascending. It's the angels that are doing that. God is standing at the top of this ladder. And what God does to Jacob is he confirms the promise that was made to him. Actually, it was made to his mama. What God does is he comes to him and says, here's the thing. The land you're on, I'm going to give it to you. Because I promised Abraham and I promised Isaac, and now I'm promising you. You're going to be made into a great nation, and the world is going to be blessed, Jacob, because of you. And I'm not going to leave you, and I'm not going to abandon you, and I'm going to do all of these things because I have promised you I will do them. Now, when we read Scripture, we have to be kind of careful. Because it's so easy for us to read these promises that God is making to Jacob and kind of make them promises that he's making to us. But that's not what's going on here. God is making promises to Jacob, later to Jacob's descendants. That's where this is going. But as 21st century New Testament followers of Christ, we recognize that the same God has made promises to us, hasn't he? The same God that we worship here today has promised that he would never leave us or abandon us. In fact, he said, I'll always be with you to the end of the age. He promised us forgiveness for our sins. He's promised us grace. He promised to do or to deal with our two greatest problems, the problem of sin and the problem of death. And he did it when he died on the cross and rose from the grave 3 days later. He promised that one day every wrong would be made right. The same God has made so many promises to us. The thing is that we, if we're not careful, can come to view these promises in the same way that Jacob views them, with skepticism. Look what happens next in the story. Jacob wakes up, and in verse 16 it says this. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. There, Lord, Yahweh, don't miss this. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. Now he uses a more generic term, Elohim, right? This is the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. This is exactly what the cultures that were around him would have thought, what they would have understood. He's not entering into any kind of special awareness or relationship with God, according to Jacob. He's still very much skeptical. This is just what he would expect based upon Mesopotamian culture. It continues on, verse 18. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he placed under his head, and he set it up as a pillar, and he poured oil on top of it, and he called the place Bethel, which means house of God. Though the city used to be called Luz or Luz, we're not exactly certain if there was a city there when Jacob was there or not, if the city came later, and later he renamed it Bethel. We're not exactly certain how that works. But it's real easy for us to read this. In fact, some translations of the Bible take it into consideration this way. They go, well, what Jacob is doing here is he's beginning to worship Yahweh on Yahweh's terms. He's beginning to enter into a relationship with Yahweh because Yahweh has made these promises to him. The problem is that the text, the Hebrew text, does not allow that. The Hebrew text kind of points to, no, this is a very common practice in the day. In fact, archaeologists have found many stone pillars that have been set up as altars, as places of worship of all of the other gods that operated around that area. What Jacob was doing is he was falling back into the system of everyone around him. He was falling back into the system that everyone else around him would have already known. He was just doing what everyone else was doing, what he had been taught to do. You want to know what's interesting? Is I think so many times, so many of us can do the exact same thing and fall back into practices just because people in our community and people in our context are doing them. We can fall back into an old way of interacting with God. So what Jesus did when he came is he ushered in something brand new, not a reboot of an old system. But the problem is when we start negotiating the terms of our obedience with God, what we do is we fall right back into a temple model with sacred places and sacred men. You remember when we talked about that? We fall right back into that same type of system. And the negotiations we make are along these lines. God, if you'll, then I'll go to church. If you'll, then I'll get back in church. If you'll, then I'll get my family back in church. If you'll, then I'll be baptized. If you'll, then I'll give. If you'll, then I'll be obedient. If you will do this for me, then I will be obedient to you in some kind of way as to earn your favor or to pay back your love. That is the temple model. And we do exactly what Jacob does when we start negotiating the terms of our obedience with God. So Jacob lays down the altar and pours the oil on it, falling back into a system that was so familiar around him. And then we start to see the negotiations. Verse 20. And Jacob made a vow saying, if God, now real quick, some translations say since God. They translate the syntax a little differently. But given the context, I think what Jacob is doing is he's negotiating some terms. He's putting some conditions on his obedience. If God will be with me, and if God will watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and if God will give me the food to eat and the clothes to wear so that I return safely to my father's household, not this land he told me I'd return safely to, but to my daddy's house where I want to go. If he'll do that, then the Lord Yahweh will be my Elohim God. Then I'll enter into a relationship with him. And the stone that I've set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, God, I will give you a tenth of. I think that's kind of funny, actually, because God has just promised to give him a bunch of land, a bunch of descendants, and a bunch of wealth. And when Jacob does, he was like, all right, well, if God, you're going to give me all that, you're going to make me wealthy and give me a bunch of land, then I don't know, what do you say, 10%? Right? Come on, 10%. It's the least I can do, God. Right? Here we go. Now, the 10th is something that also is very cultural around there. What I think is interesting is who you're going to give 10% to. There's no priest of God. Like, Jacob, you're it. Like, you're the person that he's trying to enter into a relationship with. Like, who are you going to give it? Is it maybe in sacrifices? Like, we're not exactly certain how it works, but what Jacob says to him is this. Don't miss this. If you'll clothe me and keep me comfortable and keep me safe, and if you'll give me food and if you'll keep me protected along the way, if you help me on my journey, you help me get back to my daddy's house where I can inherit all that stuff that he's promised me as well, along with what it is that you promised me. If you'll do that, then God, I'll be obedient. Then God, I'll worship you. Then God, I'll know that you're really God. I think, and don't we do the same thing? Don't we negotiate the terms of our obedience with God and go, listen, God, I'll be better. I'll surrender to you my life if you'll come through for me. Now, it's easy for us to get on Jacob. Let's cut Jacob some slack here because we can empathize with him. Up to this point, God has not really shown himself to Jacob. It was Abraham that prayed that God would give Sarah a baby, and he did. It was Isaac that prayed that Rebekah would be able to conceive, and she was. They had seen God fulfill promises. They had seen God be faithful. Jacob had navigated his own way. He's the master of his own domain. He's doing it all on his own. And he hasn't had to trust God or watch God fulfill promises because he's manipulated and lied and cheated his way to everything that he's gotten right now. Right? And so it's easy to go, well, Jacob just doesn't know. That's all right. We can cut him some slack. Maybe we can. Maybe we can. But here's the thing that I want us to understand today. We know that God is a God that fulfills his promises. We know. We've seen him do it. God promised to make a way for us to have a relationship with him again. And so he sent his son to die and to rise from the dead to deal with sin and death. And he's already done it. And when we turn around and go, God, I'll be obedient if you are good to me and if you bless me, I can only imagine. I don't want to put words in God's mouth because that's dangerous, but I just can only imagine God going, I've already proven it to you. I've already shown you. I've already done so much for you. And here's the thing, church, your obedience was not necessary for him to die for you. Your obedience was not necessary to earn his favor or earn his grace. The reason we're obedient is not so God will save us, but because someone that dies for you is for you. And to be obedient to him is to act in your own best interest because God's parameters and guidelines are not there to keep you from having fun. His parameters and his guidelines are to keep you from getting hurt. Let me see if I can explain it this way. We have a dog. And really, if you've seen our dog, that's questionable. We have a Maltipoo that really looks like just like a squirrel, maybe a little bigger. And this Maltipoo weighs somewhere between 5 and 7 pounds. She's gotten a little fatter as of late because somebody who shall go nameless, but whose initials are Jody Powell, likes to feed her from the table. And Princess is this, like she's this dog and we love her so much. And we have this backyard that's fenced in. And Princess has full reign of the backyard. It is her little kingdom. And it's not like she's a big lab or a big, golden retriever or some kind of animal that needs like a lot more space to run. Like Princess is 7 pounds and we have a pretty big backyard. She could run for days back there. And it's just like she has full reign of it. And we have a fence back there to keep Princess in the fence. And the reason we have a fence is not because we want Princess to avoid the fun of outside the fence. It's not like we know there's like an amusement park for puppies outside the fence and we're trying to keep her from experiencing that goodness, right? The reason we have the fence is because outside of the fence, it's a very dangerous world for a 7-pound puppy named Princess. When she gets outside the fence, there are things that could hurt her. There are bigger dogs that could have her for a snack and we'd never miss her. She's small enough that like a good-sized hawk or an eagle, like that's a real fear, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's how tiny that she is. And she's got a little bit of like bravado in her, for a girl named Princess. She's got a little bit of I'm a big bad dog. I can see her getting out in a car coming down the street. She'd be like, oh, get that car, and then the car hurts her or kills her. And we know that the world is dangerous outside of the fence. And it's not because we want to keep her from having fun. It's because, listen, we have her best interest at heart. And what I want you to understand about obedience to God is this. God calls you to obedience. God calls you to a life. God calls you to a way of living. Not because He wants to keep you from having fun. Not because He wants to keep you under His thumb and under control. God calls you to parameters in which you should live because He has your best interest at heart. And He knows when you get outside of those parameters, you run the risk of hurting yourself and those that are closest to you. He just wants what's good for you. And the thing is Jacob may not understand that because he hasn't seen God fulfill His promises, but we have witnessed it. We have seen it. We know that God is for us. So we can trust Him enough to be obedient to Him without having to negotiate some other blessing from Him. Because at the end of the day, we are not in a position to negotiate the terms of our obedience with God. Neither was Jacob. He just didn't realize it. So here's a question I want to ask you. Where is it that you're trying to negotiate? What is in your own heart that you're holding back? Where is the area where you're going, okay, God, if you'll just, then I'll. Okay, God, there's this thing I know that you've called me to do. It's a direction you've called me to go in. It's a discipline you've called me to kind of undertake. And I'll do it, God. But first, I'm going to need you to come through in this way for me. First, I'm going to need you to jump through these hoops. And then I'll be able to do that. I wonder if it's like maybe vocational ministry. Maybe it's like me. Where, somewhere in your heart, this is where God's called me. This is what He's led me to. And it's terrifying because you want to go on vacation with your family and you want to make money. And you've seen preachers, and you don't want that. I get it. And you're a little bit scared because what's your wife going to think? What's your husband going to think? What's your parents going to think? What are my neighbors going to think? Are they going to think I'm some kind of weirdo Jesus freak? I get it. And you're going, okay, God, if you can play the cards this way, then I'll know. Okay, God, I'll negotiate this and I'll be obedient, but if and only if you do these things first. Maybe it's missions. Maybe God has called you to go on a short-term mission trip. Maybe He's called you to go and serve internationally or even in a place in our country that is so in need of the gospel. And yet it's terrifying. You don't know how you're going to pay for it. You don't know how you're going to be able to afford it. You know you're going to have to give up some of the luxuries and comforts of home in order to follow through with what it is that God has called you to do. And so you begin to negotiate, okay, God, if you'll set this up, and if you'll provide this, and if you'll do this, then I'll be obedient and I'll go. Maybe you're negotiating things just for your own life. God, if you'll give me that business deal, then I'll be faithful with my finances. Then I'll get a budget and stick to it. God, if you'll just fix my marriage, then I'll be faithful to fix me. Then I'll go to counseling. Then I'll get help. Then God, I'll overcome the addiction. Then I'll enter into rehab. God, but you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to show me. And you continue to negotiate. Maybe it's a public profession of your faith. Maybe you watched those 4 folks get baptized last week. And God is calling you to publicly profess your faith and be baptized. And you go, oh, God, that's so terrifying. If I don't have to do a video, then I'll do it. God, if I don't have to do it in front of everybody, then I'll do it. You make all of these conditions to surround the obedience, the thing that you know God has called you to do. Already, maybe it's about giving your life to Jesus for the very first time. You know that God is calling you to surrender, but it's terrifying because you're not certain if you can trust Him. You're not certain if He's going to come through for you. You don't know what people are going to think. You think you might lose friends. You think it might sever relationships. But God is calling you into a relationship with Him, and you're going, okay, God, if you can, then I'll. Okay, God, if you will, then I will. I'm telling you, you are in no position to negotiate your terms of obedience with God. And you can trust Him because He's already gone on record that He has your best interest at heart. So today, would you be willing to surrender? Would you be willing to say, God, no more negotiations. I'm going to plunge into what it is that you have called me to do, and I'm going to trust you. Rather than demand of you, I'm going to trust you. Rather than put conditions on it, I'm just going to trust you to do what you said you can do. And I know I can trust you because you've done it in the past. You're going to do it again. Just then, I'm going to pray. And as we pray, I want you to pray. Spend some time with God and ask Him, where is it that you're negotiating? Where is it that you're holding back? Where is it that you're falling away from what it is He's called you to do? And when I finish our prayer, I want to invite you, if you want to know where to go next, if you want to know what the next step is, if you want to sign up for baptism, if you want to give your life to Jesus, if you want to just have somebody pray with you because you're not exactly certain what the next step is, I want to invite you when our service is over today. Back here to my left, your right, to the right of the prayer station is our starting point room. Our elders will be back there. Some of their spouses will be back there. I'll be back there eventually. I'll make my way back there. I would love to talk with you and pray with you so that you can know what it is that's next. As you surrender everything to God and stop coming to Him like a toddler to a parent, negotiate the terms of your obedience. Let me pray for us. God, I thank you so much because you have given us so much. You have given Jesus to die on the cross. You rose Him from the dead because you wanted to show to us that you were going to provide a way for us to have a relationship with you. You were going to provide a way. God, we don't have to negotiate. We don't have to cheat and lie. You're just there asking us to surrender to you. So God, I pray that you would help us to do that. Point out to our own hearts the areas that we're negotiating. Those things that somewhere deep down inside of us we know that you're calling us to. Those things that you're leading us into. But for whatever reason, we're hesitant to give that up. We're hesitant to surrender. Show us those areas that we're negotiating with you. Holding back from you. And then God, I pray that you give us not only wisdom to see them, but I pray that you give us the courage to take the next step. To go find someone in our starting point room. To go find someone to talk with, to pray with. To make that phone call to the counselor. To send that email to the pastor. To give that phone call to your home group leader. Where you go, I just need help. I just need prayer. I just need support. Because what I'm about to do is I'm about to follow God regardless, without negotiation. God, I pray that you'd be honored through our desire to serve you, and be obedient to you, simply because you've done so much for us already. Thank you for loving us, and thank you for sending Jesus to die for us. We pray these things in His name. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week. Starting point right back here.